Hello fellow cinematographers and directors, my name is Anton, I'm a DP based in LA, and the topic of today's video is the elephant in the room.
Are you scared that I'll find out that you can't get it up?
Verticals. Let's talk about them. I've seen some content about it from producers and actors. I haven't seen anyone talk about them from the crew side. So I'm gonna try to demystify. For those who've never heard of verticals, I'll give you quick stats on what they are. And after that, I'll share a little bit about my experience DPing my first vertical last year. What are verticals? Verticals are basically a new age type of soap opera. They're bite-sized episode dramas, 1 to 2 minutes per episode. Essentially, they're feature films, because their scripts can be anywhere from 80 to 120 pages. There's around 50 episodes in a show on average, and their business model is that the customers pay to watch. Some of the biggest platforms are Reelshorts and Dramabox. I shot for Dramabox. The global vertical microdrama market is experiencing explosive growth in 2025, with revenue projected to exceed 11 billion. Why is it an elephant in the room, and why in the film industry it's sort of treated like a bastard child that you need to take care of but can't tell anyone about its existence? One might think the stories are really dumb. But I used to think that way until I've watched enough of them and I've worked on one myself. What I realized is that they're written and made like this on purpose. Someone really smart figured out that this specific genre works and people are paying for it. And at the end of the day, it's about making money, because the revenue is where our rates as filmmakers come from. When it comes to production value and the way you shoot it and light it compared to a regular commercial or a narrative project, is that the name of the game is speed, and very often you're just trying to make the day. There really is no time to make anything extra nice or crispy. Done is better than not done. So what you see very often is a lot of these verticals look really flat in terms of lighting, and it's not because they hire people who don't know how to do that. It's actually the opposite. They hire very competent people who know what they're doing. They're actual real film professionals. A lot of my proper DP friends actually work on these verticals. When you see that something doesn't look good or flat, the only reason was because there was no time. They're just trying to keep the ball rolling. They're trying to finish the day. Also, some people who've been doing this for too long, they just get lazy. There's really no real incentive to make them look nice because it's good enough for the client. You're not going to post it on your Instagram anyway. There's really no incentive to make it extra cinematic, if you will. So some of the biggest platforms, like I mentioned before, are Reelshorts and Dramabox, but there's so many third-party production companies that are hired by Dramabox or Reelshorts. There really is no standard way of approaching a vertical show. When it comes to pre-production, some companies plan a little bit, some companies don't plan at all. So you constantly have to keep thinking on your feet and adapt to a situation at hand. Given how much revenue these verticals are making, at least in Los Angeles, as of January 2026, these verticals is the only consistent work right now. So whether you love it or hate it, this is the work that's available, so we should be thankful that at least we have this. Do I think it's going to replace anything? No. Is this a new type of media that's carving its own place? Absolutely. Apparently there's an audience for it and it makes money. And that's exactly the recipe for any successful type of media. It's only going to get bigger from here. Let's talk about my vertical. This was a show produced for Dramabox. It's called A Dangerous Engagement. We shot it in 8 days. The script was 80 something pages. From pre-production, we only did location scouting. Everything was figured out right there on the spot every single day, right before we shoot the actual scene. A fun thing to mention is that this vertical was my first project where I DP'd, but I did not operate the camera. This was a new experience for me. I always operated before. I remember watching this interview with Peter Jackson. This quote really stuck with me. I'm paraphrasing, but basically what he said was, as a director, you can only plan so much, but you have to leave room for other artists to step in and bring their own talent and their own vision into it. At the end, the product is very unique because you allow other people to come in and do their jobs. Not only is this efficient, but also, I think, proper way to work.
I've got this really hot Tinder date.
Throughout the entire show, just to save time, I try to stick to the basics. I would always try to do either a Hollywood sandwich, soft hob, or a Deacon's Cove light. This is a light version of a Hollywood sandwich. It's a soft light from the right and a bit of a kicker from the left. And that's pretty much all there is. And so whenever we would switch angles, we would turn the lights around where it makes sense for that specific angle. So the thing about shooting rain or anything with falling water, always backlight your water. Otherwise you can't see it. So in this example, I had a backlight in the far left of the parking lot going this way. It's giving her backlight and lighting the water. And on the left side here, there's a huge building with a white wall. And what we did was we pointed an aperture 1200D into the wall, effectively rendering that wall as a 40 by 40 bounce, which spread a really nice and even soft fill light everywhere. For this little close-up, it's the same backlight. I think we just brought it closer so it hits the car in the correct angle and looks really nice. This reflection in the mirror here is that big white wall that's behind us. The bad guys are coming. So in this shot, we still have this huge 40 by 40 soft light now on the right side. But what I did with the previous backlight that was on the far left side here, I turned it off, and instead there is another backlight in the far right side of the parking lot that's hitting her here. It's giving rain backlight. The thing about shooting coverage when you know you're going to be running out of time, you want to think ahead. If I know there's a scene and these are the angles that we need, before we even start, I'll ask the gaffer to put the lights in the position where we will need them, and I only turn them on one by one for the specific angles that we need. Whenever we switch, we don't need to waste time moving lights around, setting them up again, because they're already there, and all you have to do is just turn them on your iPad.
Just want to have some fun.
I can talk about lighting all day, but for this one, I wanted to talk about something that I had to actively think about all the time, and that is dynamic blocking. It's really easy to do coverage when there's only 2 people talking, but as soon as there are 3, 4, or 5 people, things get complicated really fast. So we have a car and we have a girl. These bad guys coming out and they're facing her. So how do we cover this? We have a master shot of all 3 of them. And then we have coverage of all these lines because they're all interact with each other at some point in the story. So ideally, you would want to have these angles covering her from each of their shoulders. But we eliminated these. We're getting everything from this master shot anyway. We'd get this angle, and we got these angles. I know right now it looks like a mess. When you edit this and you really keep track of who talks to who, this blocking makes sense. The shot was fun to do. These are actual headlights from the car that are really strong. I'm surprised they're not clipping. The colorist did a pretty good job. So the only lights that we have in the scene is this huge 40 by 40 bounce with a 1200D and only those headlights. At some point we actually considered using real headlights. In the beginning I even did start to set up the shot where it's a bit of a soft hop situation where the headlights would cut on her shoulders. Some of it would bounce back on her face. But the director said this shot is very specific to this genre. They repeat this shot in many other verticals with the same type of story. It's the exact same setup from before. There's a backlight from the far left. There is a big 40 by 40 bounce from the left. What's hitting her from the front, I think it was a 300D or 600D. The gaffer put on a swivel. It just turns into her face as if the car just pulled in.
Kidnapping me from my job?
The burger joint's not a job.
So here's the same situation with blocking. It's really straightforward when there's 2 people talking. Their conversation line is here. So our over-the-shoulder coverage is like this. But as soon as a new character arrives, now we establish a new conversation line that needs a whole set of new cameras. As we go further in the story, there's actually some reactions between these 2 male characters. And now there's a new conversation line that's established. We need 2 more cameras. It gets complicated really fast. You just constantly have to keep track of who's talking to who's looking left to right. When you don't pre-plan this, it takes a lot of mental gymnastics to stay on top of it and to keep everything inside your brain so that nothing is wrong and it's consistent. You're staying on the correct side of the line. If you want to learn more about blocking, one of my favorite courses on blocking, and this is not sponsored, is called Hollywood Camera Work. And this is by far, hands down, the most detailed course on blocking I've ever seen in my entire life. I rewatch it every now and then, and I still discover new things. It's packed with details. This nightclub sequence was one of my favorite to cover. The approach was pretty standard. They're basically smushed in between two lights. There is a light panel 4 or light panel 2 on the far right side of the bar, and on the left side we have an aperture Nova 300 into an 8x diffusion frame that's giving blue ambience. Additionally, I asked the gaffer to put Titan tubes on the floor, behind the bar, on the inside, give our actresses a bit of a bar light. And the reason I chose blue and purple is because these colors are next to each other on the color wheel. It's just a safe and pleasing color combination. This was one of my favorite scenes to shoot in this vertical. This is happening in the kitchen. The key light on her comes from a light mat 4 across the table. So that's the table. It's hitting her from the far side. On the left, she's being lit by a Titan tube. This tube has a pool noodle over it, which is a really neat trick that I saw my gaffer use. And the coolest thing about this scene is that in the back here, we have this beautiful shimmering from the water. And that actually wasn't intentional. I didn't even realize that was there until we were done. What that is house lights that are inside this little pool that they have in the back there. It's coming through water. It gives it that nice shimmer. I like this scene a lot. So this is happening in a very narrow and long corridor that has nowhere to put lights. But luckily on the left side here, this whole thing is a huge glass window, which leads to the next room, which is a big hallway with wooden walls. This is one of those examples where you have to stay on your feet and think creatively and come up with different solutions on the fly. What we did was we put Nova 300 bouncing into one of these wooden walls at a cooler temperature. The reason we did that was because the wood has a very red and warm texture. So the bounce light from that Nova 300 would have been a lot warmer. So you have to compensate by making the color temperature cooler than you would need. These practicals here, there's actually a bunch of them in the hallway. They're all swapped for our aperture bulbs so we can control them because the house lights were actually too bright and they were clipping. Here's an example of an attempted soft hob. We have a hard light coming across on her body and then it's soft on the face. She's being backlit practically by those lights in the kitchen. From the front, she's sitting at a table. Right above the table, there's a Titan tube with a pool noodle set to something like 2700 Kelvin. All right, that'll do it for this one. Thanks so much for watching. Let me know if you have any questions about the verticals. I'm considering to make more videos in the future. There's a lot to talk about, a lot to cover, a lot to share. It's an emerging industry, so we're currently ahead of the curve, or at the very least, right on top of the curve. Because surprisingly, I still meet people that have not heard of verticals. Considering how big this thing is, it's only going to get bigger and more people are going to be shooting them. The good thing about these verticals is that they are actually pretty serious about quality control. So a lot of the people that work on them are actual real-life film professionals who know what they're doing, who work on much bigger stuff. They just do verticals to make money and yeah, basically just make money. Thanks for tuning in. I will see you in the next video.